Hey y'all, we're down here in Texas, day 2. Alright, so Texas has been straight up struggling to gain their independence from who? Yes, Mexico. Okay, so let's review real quickly just to make sure that we are up to speed with what's going on in Texas. So, going all the way back to Florida, because I think it's important to review this. Remember, we got Florida through the Adams-Onis Treaty. However, there was an issue where Florida didn't immediately become a state. So looking at this question number 3, why wasn't Florida admitted right away as a state even though they met the guidelines of the Northwest Ordinance? So the Northwest Ordinance set guidelines for territories to become a state. The guidelines were the territory had to have 60,000 people and an appointed governor, which Florida had. But it took so long because Florida applied to be a slave state. And it was very important that we had a balance of slave states and free states. Slave states meaning those states practiced slavery, free states meaning slavery was not allowed there. So in order to maintain that balance, we had to wait for another free state to apply, then we could admit Florida. So it's really important to remember that as we continue to learn about Texas. All right, so day 1, Texas, as I mentioned, Texas is struggling. They want to become independent of Mexico. There's a couple different things happening here. So not only does Texas want to become independent of Mexico, America is also very land hungry and wants to add Texas to the United States. So Americans gradually begin to move into Texas by way of this little rule here. So they kind of made a deal. Mexico requires of the Americans in Texas and what most Americans do. So Mexico's like, all right, Americans, you guys can go into Texas, that's fine, but here are the things you had to follow. You have to be Spanish, Catholic, anti-slavery, and only 300 families can come. Do you guys think U.S. followed these little rules? Absolutely not. It's the U.S. So America was sending the English, Protestants, people that were pro-slavery, and we continued to flood Texas, greatly outnumber Mexicans in Texas. So eventually, we have more Americans living in Texas than we do Mexicans, which is important to remember that Mexico, once again, has control over Texas. So as this starts to happen, we start getting these people called Texans, which are basically Americans that live in Texas, and they want their independence. So Mexican leader Santa Anna threatened to close its borders and end slavery in Texas. Texans, which include Americans as well as Tejanos, Mexicans that lived in Texas, decided to unite and plan a rebellion. So this is this famous battle at the Alamo. What happens at the Alamo? Texas takes an L. So we lose to Mexico. Texans and the Tejanos lose at the Alamo. But this turns out to be a good thing because they use this battle at the Alamo to kind of fuel their fire to continue fighting for their independence, which they eventually gain. So let's take a look at these questions. First of all, who is Stephen Austin? That was the father of Texas. Big, important leader. As you know, there is a city in Texas today called Austin. I guess you guys could probably guess where that came from. What happened at the Alamo? That's where the Texans took the L against Mexico. They lost. And then what struggles took place in Texas? Texans struggled to gain their independence and lost a lot of people in fighting Mexico. Do you guys think these struggles were necessary? You could say no, that's totally up to you, it's an opinion, but my opinion is yes, because they end up eventually gaining their independence using these struggles that they've fallen victim to try and strengthen them so they overcome those issues and they eventually become Texas, an independent entity. All right, so here's what you're going to be learning today. Today I want you guys to be able to explain how Texas gains its independence. So you're going to continue talking about that. And then define and describe the Lone Star Republic, which is what Texas becomes when it is independent of Mexico. So you guys are going to look at this image right here of border disagreements. You got a couple questions to answer. Then as you scroll down, here's how it becomes independent and the president they pick and so on and so forth. As you can see, Right here, question number 3, why do you think America did not allow them to be a state right away? So Texas does want to be a part of the United States, but America cannot admit them. And as you recall, I brought up that issue with Florida as well. So you can imagine that this might have to do something with the balance of slave states and free states. So keep that in mind when you're answering number 3. And then finally, you guys have 6 review questions. So you're really just doing 2 documents, some review questions, and that is today's assignment. If you have any questions, message your teachers.